Warning: the following program is a satirical look at Indigenous news, politics, and current events. A deep look inward is advised.
Ani and bonjour, and welcome to The Laughing Drum. Television so deeply and profoundly Indigenous, anywhere we step gets reserve status. We have an exciting show tonight: internal cultural appropriation, the expulsion of Jody Wilson-Raybould from the Liberal Party, and a consultant who wants to cash in on a multi-million-dollar emergency housing project. We are going to tackle it all. TV's nichiest team of pundits, the Red Power panel, is here, and they are ready to get to work. And let's get to it, my friends. This week, the Red Power panel is, I should introduce you first.
Yeah.
That might help. Single source, organic, and undeniably Métis, and that's just his mustache. Comic Sasha Mark is here. A comic so Indigenous, their every word is a proverb. Alyssa Black. And the Elvis of Elvis impersonators, comic Jerry the Big Bear Barrett.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Welcome to you all. Okay. Let's start with this consultant story. You'll remember that in January, the Cat Lake First Nation declared a state of emergency over the state of houses in the Northern Ontario community. Leaders and citizens alike said that mold and other problems were making people sick, and they demanded the feds and province do something. So after weeks of negotiations, Canada's Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan announced in February that the community would receive $12.8 million. But afterwards, a Thunder Bay-based consultant came forward and said that he had signed a contract with the First Nation to help, claimed he put weeks of unpaid work into negotiations, and now wants $1.2 million for his part. Some media have seen the contract, Paul inside, apparently with the previous chief of the community, and it states that he will receive 10% of any funding for housing. But Seamus O'Regan says he's not getting anything. Red Power panel, what do you make of this story?
What a shame. How does it feel to be promised something and then not get it? That must be an awful feeling for this Thunder Bay man.
Are you saying he was not treated well? Is that what you're saying?
Only 10%. My agent takes 30.
Well, there you go.
So I feel you, but then, you know,
It's a bit of a bargain.
30% of everything I make goes to my agent. My Indian agent at that. So go figure. But anyway.
He's got a talent agent and an Indian agent. It's awesome. Okay, the consultant claims that no deal would be possible unless he helped. So even if he's partially right, what does this say about the job Indigenous Services is supposed to be doing? Like, why would it take a consultant to get something that you should be rightfully owed?
Well, I think the consultant probably was in Thunder Bay, and perhaps they've had dealings with consultants before, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. Yeah. But whether or not the contract will hold up in a court of law, I don't know. I mean, you've got the government now saying, you know, we're not going to pay 10% to this guy. And at one point, what is it? 1.2 million? Like, yeah, he had to travel back and forth and buy a couple computers, I think, and something else.
Yeah,
but
cell phones or something.
It's not $1.2 million worth of work and
I think he was
equipment.
paid. He was paid a bit of money already.
What's he worried about? Go to Vegas; it'll still be there when everything's said and done. You'll win your $1 million.
Welcome to showbiz, kid. Welcome to showbiz.
You want to earn your commission?
Okay, we often hear there's an Indigenous industry in this country. Does this story make you believe that even more?
Oh, yeah. People make money off of us all the time. I mean, look at the health industry. Look at basically every industry. There is somebody who's going to be who's going to be making money off of us. Yeah, we're one hell of an industry, us Indigenous folks.
Well, I've seen it too. I've worked in broadcasting, and I've seen salespeople who join the broadcasting outfit that might be Indigenous owned and operated, and they figure they're going to come in, by God, and just make $1 million off the Indigenous people. You know, you guys are getting all this free money. I'm going to get a commission by selling advertisements on you people. And then the reality is, well, no, nobody has any money. You're not going to rip anybody off. But you know, then it suddenly hits them that, you know, the Indigenous money is going somewhere else, not necessarily to the non-Indigenous salespeople.
I couldn't hear you over all that free stuff I was getting.
Cha-ching.
All this free stuff. Is there a role for consultants at all? Like for any community? I mean, we've seen them, but I mean, do they have any real purpose for Indigenous people?
I mean, Indigenous consultants can be useful for, you know, I think a consultant does have a use, but not $1.2 million use.
Yeah.
I think it was probably helpful to have somebody come in and, you know, sort of see things that maybe other people couldn't. But again, $1.2 million useful?
But
No.
what's the difference here between the Europeans coming to North America and discovering us, right? But then, we don't know where we're going up Lake Superior. Could we hire a consultant? Oh, I'm sorry, an Indian guide.
Right.
Can we get an Indian guide to show us the, you know, all the narrow...
Sacagawea!
So, I mean, there was... Now, whether or not that Indian guide back in the day in the canoe got 10% of the beaver pelts or the land or the gold or whatever it is they were after, but at least, I mean, that's almost the same as a consultant from back in the day. But,
that's one
but nowadays, I mean, the consultants know, hopefully, the ins and outs of corporate law, land taxes, and suppliers on how to fix whatever the problem is that we might be consulting for. Yeah. They earn some money there.
I don't think it's a consultant issue right now, and to be quite honest, I think that, this is my theory, I have a theory that the Jerry name is not for 2019, because Jerry Buzz is in trouble, Jerry Pollen's in trouble, if an Instagram account,
Jerry Barron!
next! You know, my theory, there's so many Jerrys are in trouble now.
Jerry, there's a good chance
Instagram account,
there's a scandal.
fuck Jerry,
Just a matter of time, really.
All right, one last question. If you could be a consultant, what would you consult on? Sasha, let's start with you. Mustaches for
sure. And maybe like dressing like a dad who's just come from summer camp or something. I'll be a consultant for that today.
Make millions. Melissa, what would you consult on?
I would be a consultant on how to be completely sleep deprived but not look it.
Good for you. That's an art.
Mm-hmm.
And my expertise would be either broadcasting for Indigenous people, or if you want to be an Elvis tribute artist. I know all the pitfalls, all the highs, the lows, the ins and outs to being an Elvis impersonator. So
I don't want to take that course. On that note, we got to take a short break to put some more wood in our wood-fired cameras here. Don't go away, or reconciliation is dead. Welcome back to the Laughing Drum, my friends. Television so utterly Indigenous, we're fueled by righteous decolonization and possibly pemmican. I'm here with the Red Power panel, and we're going to tear into our second topic of the night. Let's talk cultural appropriation with an Indigenous twist. The Indigenous Music Awards are facing accusations of propping up internal cultural appropriation. It's not a non-Indigenous person appropriating culture, it's a First Nations artist. A First Nations artist has been nominated for an award, but they use a form of throat singing in their music. So now, Inuit artists spoke out quietly at first, but it grew into a larger issue with several high-profile people and groups, like now A Tribe Called Red are pulling out. The head of the awards, Lisa Meaches, isn't budging. Among her defenses is a claim that cultural appropriation isn't possible within Indigenous groups. Ding is right.
Great answer, great answer.
And I got you guys, before we get started, I got to say APTN is a sponsor of the awards, but that's not, neither here nor there.
Good,
Red Power panel, is she?
We're not sponsored.
I'm getting my IMA tattoo done this week. Red Power panel, is she right or wrong? Is it possible to culturally appropriate within Indigenous communities?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think the fact that as Indigenous people, we've been saying for a long time that we're many different cultures within this, Indigenous box.
Yeah.
So for me to say that because, this Cree person is Indigenous that it means they're not appropriating. They actually are, because they're not Inuit. They didn't grow up in that culture. That's, that's not who they are. So, yes, you can.
Yeah. Sasha?
No, I would say 100%. Indigenous people can appropriate Indigenous culture. I would say also, like, I believe that the Inuit weren't into it when it comes to this issue.
Sasha, your wordplay is my favorite part of the show.
Thank you.
I wait for that every single week. Jerry?
It is possible to borrow from cultures. It's not right. From what I understand, they have to, if you were to borrow somebody else's songs or stories, they have to be gifted to you. You have to be, there's a ceremony, I guess, of sorts to go through that to be able to borrow and use that in your presentations, I suppose. Of course, one of the arguments here is that it's, I guess, a Cree artist that is being booked for conferences, and the tune might be available on iTunes, and so they may be making money off it, when in fact it is, there's throat singing involved in that, and I can understand where Inuit would be concerned that, hey, you're taking food off our tables, and we didn't give this to you officially. You helped us at a function, and she stepped in, I think, as a throat singer to help them through another performance, but then thought that she was gifted this, and I don't think it was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's protocols in place for things like this. It has happened within communities where people have been gifted things or people have borrowed things and things like that. But yeah, I think when profit and commercialism come in, I think that's when things get complicated, right?
I am an Anishinaabe man.
Yes, you
are. Proud Ojibwe man. And I write screenplays, and sometimes my inspiration comes from Anishinaabe legends and some Cree legends. And so I wrote a movie treatment, and I'm working on the script now, based on the legend of Wendigo. And it's a high concept movie where Wendigo, in mine, is as tall as a tornado and actually walks within the vortex of a snowstorm.
Like
and
me.
then exactly. Yeah. That explains the hair. But anyway, in the climax of the show, the Wendigo is brought down by an Anishinaabe man. And I didn't know what the protocol was when we hunt. And so I stopped dead in my tracks, literally, because I didn't know what the right steps was. And I thought I have to treat this with respect, so I didn't go further with the project.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So.
And that's within your own
story.
culture.
But I respect the tradition, the legends, and the storytelling, that I thought, okay, I got to put this on hold until I talk to elders and find out whether A, I should go ahead with the project, or B, if I don't want to take liberties with it, and screw it all up.
You know what would have been useful in this situation?
A consultant.
An Inuit consultant. An Inuit consultant.
You're a genius.
But I mean, there's a lot of artists now, and really high-profile artists. A Tribe Called Red, Iskway. People that are nominated for some of these awards are now pulling out. Is that the right way to go about this?
I think if you have the power to instigate change, then that is the right move. And I completely agree with A Tribe Called Red and Iskway and all the other artists who are pulling out, and that's their form of protest. I think if musicians, artists can do that, then that's their choice, that's their power. And I think, the powers that be need to start listening.
Yeah.
Well, listening is one thing. How do you think that this award show can move past this, or not even move past this, but rectify this? Sasha, in your mind, what would they have to do in order to make this at least better, or at least find some way of dealing with this?
So I think one of the biggest problems they faced when this issue came about was that they also had no Inuit representatives involved with the show. So when they were speaking on behalf of Inuit people, they didn't have any representatives or consultants to talk about, and that itself was a major issue. And, you know, I can never speak for Inuit people because I'm not an Inuit person, and I think people need to understand that they can't do that. And when an Inuit person says, hey, this is harming me, this is harming my culture, we need to sit and listen to that, point blank center.
Of course. Yeah.
So I think that's what we need to do to move forward, is to shut your lips, you know.
And I brought this up before. What would happen if the Inuit artist who had this throat singing song got a call from, say, an international artist like Beyonce, and Beyonce said, "Hey, I'd like to sample your voice and your throat singing in one of my songs," and it could be, you know, a worldwide exposure for this. Is Beyonce, you know, appropriating Inuit culture or the language, or in that instance, or if she gets the blessing of the artist to say, "Oh yeah, you can," and then it's mixed up with Beyonce's music. Is that?
Well, that's when it becomes like, and I think that's what's happening now. Is that as Indigenous artists become more and more visible, these things are going to keep coming up, I think.
Yeah.
I would sell my first 10 babies to Beyonce, so I don't think I would be for something like that.
And one last point from the Big Bear, and that is, let's talk about Elvis again.
Was he Indigenous?
Yes, he was. His great-great-grandmother was Cherokee, was Pocahontas. But anyway, that aside, the black musicians and artists of the world have always said that Elvis stole the black man's music. And so, I mean, this is nothing new. It's been an argument going on for generations about, you know, different music and where do you get it. But, you know, Elvis was given a lot of opportunity and took that music to a whole new level, giving exposure to R&B and gospel. And, well, amen.
That's one way to look at it. Final words from Jerry Barrett. We have to take a short break, so fix yourself some tea and bannock and come right back.
Did you know we got the social medias?
Don't lie.
It's true. Like the Laughing Drum on Facebook and follow us on Twitter right now.
I don't know what's going on. I hear whispers. Welcome back to the Laughing Drum and our third and final topic of the night. The Red Power panel is here, and they are raring to go. So let's talk everyone's favorite news story, Jody Wilson-Raybould versus the Liberals. And I don't even know where to begin with this. So much has happened since the last time we talked about on this show. I mean, I think the last time when we left off,
on our last episode, a very special episode, she was still a Liberal.
Yes.
Her colleague, Jane Philpott, was still a Liberal. Since then, she came forward with more evidence that she says backs up her claims that there was interference or an attempt to interfere or an attempt to pressure her to strike a deal for the big company SNC-Lavalin. She released a recording of a phone call she had with the former clerk of the Privy Council, and that seemed to be the last straw for Trudeau, who then expelled her. Yes, you're laughing, Jerry.
He probably has recordings of his own given to him by the RCMP that we don't know about.
So I always thought they recorded everything. I don't know.
I'm sure they do.
I mean, anyway, she got expelled. Jane Philpott, who arguably didn't have as much involvement in this as well, she was expelled as well. And now here we are, and the party seems to have largely turned against Jody Wilson-Raybould. Or at least that's the impression we're getting, is that if you follow the media, you'll see that there's she's being framed very negatively in all of this, except in her own writing, where apparently she is viewed more favorably than Trudeau himself. So,
and in Indigenous country too, we've rallied behind her, and everybody seems to be championing her because she's telling her truth and stood her ground and is there. And you couldn't ask for a better representation, you know, not just for Indigenous people but for women. Yeah. And she's standing strong.
That, you see, I find this story fascinating for a lot of reasons, mostly because it's like a soap opera, but also because this, on the surface, or if you look at what was happening here, this was not an Indigenous story. This was a Canadian political and industry story. Why do you think so many? Is it just because of who the key player is, or is there something else going on here? Like, why has this become such an Indigenous story?
because of her Indigenous background and the portfolio that she held before. And, you know, I just think that she's an excellent role model for people who are going into the political world. And if you're just coming into the world as a baby, this would be a wonderful human being for you to hold as a role model.
This is replacing Sesame Street.
Yes, she could become a character on Sesame Street. Why not?
Hey, why not? Yeah. How do you think the Liberals have handled this? I mean, the way it's looking in the media now, I don't think any of us are really
throw
liberal
the
insiders.
Indigenous woman under the bus. You know, that seems to be the liberal way of doing things. Throw the Indigenous people under the bus, and then, you know, throw up your hands and go, oh, they didn't do what we told them to do. It's their fault.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
I'd say the Phil plot has thickened.
I was waiting for this.
Third time's a charm.
But no, Justin Trudeau's response was like, you know, she crossed the line. But like, what is that line? Because the SNC-Lavalin, was there no line there at all? Like that situation? Like, I don't know if there's a line, if there's no crossing the lines, if they're like walking a line, if they're snorting lines. Like in the government, I don't know what's going on anymore. I would say this is the best season of Big Brother Canada. Everyone's going home. Everyone's getting
That's
home.
what I mean. I can't stop.
Well, someone's going to get voted out of the House. I wonder who that could be at the end of
Has this changed how you view Canadian politics? Or is this no big surprise? I mean, because we hear varying degrees of people saying, well, this is just politics. This is how it's done.
I mean, it is just politics. It shouldn't be. This shouldn't be how Canada does things. You know, I think it's very sloppy and it's very discriminating. But, you know, in hindsight, this is how Canadian politics has been run forever. Just, you know, throw the Indigenous people, you know, into the fire, under the bus, you know, just blame them. And that's Canada.
Yeah, because that was actually going to be the next question, is like some said that this highlights how Canada treats Indigenous women.
It is.
I mean, there's been some articles, op-eds that have been written that basically say, like, this is, you toe the party line or you're villainized.
So they picked the wrong woman this time.
Well,
Yes.
what do you think is next for her?
Ah.
She says she wants to stay in politics. Apparently her, like I said in the intro there, she's viewed very favorably in her own riding, even though she can't run as a Liberal.
I was going to propose to her here on the Laughing Drum. I thought we would.
Jerry, we talked about this.
A quickie divorce. But I mean,
Inappropriate behavior.
I'll appropriate my own culture a little bit here. You know that?
If Jody Wilson-Raybould and a few others pulled away from the caucuses and did what Quebec did and basically said, let's create an Indigenous caucus, do you think people would vote for that?
I sure as heck would.
Yeah.
I
You don't even vote.
I don't even vote, but I would. It would make me want to vote.
As the show, that's all the gall darn time we've got tonight. Thanks to the Red Power panel for
And another thing!
sharing your deepest, darkest thoughts. Thanks to the crew that make this show happen every week. And of course, thanks to you for tuning in. We'll see you back here next week.